It is almost noon. It's 11:53 right now.
Excellent. I see some familiar faces from Foundations of Embodiment course. Who else is here? Welcome.
If you're just joining us, you can type where you're calling in from in the chat, or you can rename yourself. Welcome everyone to the EYP Masterclasses. It's the first session. We have about 6 minutes, so settle in, get comfy.
Yeah, and anyone who is watching this on the replay, feel free to skip ahead that 5.5, 6 minutes, and you'll get to the start of this.
You can also feel free to type in the chat what you're looking forward to from today's session. What are you looking to get out of this session?
Yeah.
Karen is going to be taking us through giving pose from the Embodied Yoga Principles framework. I'm really excited. Karen, how do you feel?
A bit nervous, to be honest. Yeah, a bit nervous, like the opening act. I'm trying to think of it as the warm-up act, which is a bit less important, especially at a festival, is like when everyone's still ignoring the music. So yeah, a bit nervous.
Would a kitten help? I found a kitten yesterday.
You found a kitten? Wow, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Random. Found a kitten.
Well, she almost got ran over by a car. And so I'm naming her Kia because that was the car that almost ran her. It was horrifying. But this is what came out of it. Hello.
Oh, let me just pin you so I can see. Oh, cute.
Welcome everyone to the EYP Masterclasses. We always have cats. I didn't know that this time it would be my cat. Well, temporarily my cat, we'll see.
Yeah, you might get a bit attached and hope the owner doesn't turn up.
Well, that's what I'm keeping in mind. It's probably a stray. If you're just tuning in, feel free to type in the chat where you're calling in from.
Looking forward to hearing the energetics behind the poses and the framework. Learn what you fave for use about giving pose.
And I'll also add in while we're going over that, we'll mention this again, but there is a live stream as well, and many people on the live stream. So if you're like, wait, I can't work out how to turn my camera on and off, that's because you're on the live stream. There's limits in the Zoom room. So people who have got products from us in the past are in the Zoom room, and then there's a whole heap of people on the live stream, but we'll look at comments from there and where you're typing in from, and if there's any questions that we have time for, we will answer that. So you're not being left alone there. I'll be monitoring that as well and bringing it to Sarah and Karen.
Thank you, Steve. I see some other EYP teachers here. That's great. People already on the training. So I've got to get it right then. Make sure I do it right. Sarah and Steve are trained as well, by the way. So
yes, Karen, you were one of my first EYP teachers.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. We are spreading it around the world. Hopefully that's the idea. Hi, Cheryl. Good to see you. It's nice.
Hello, Finland. Hello, Canada.
It's nice if you're willing to put your camera on. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do in this webinar masterclass. So if it's better for you not to, that's absolutely fine. But it gives me a bit more of a sense that there's some people here, a few people here in the Zoom room. So I'm not just talking to myself. Megan in California. Germany in the house. Slovakia. There's Vijayadasa. Vijayadasa was one of my first EYP teachers. He's going to be doing a couple of sessions later this week. There's a few more comments in the chat there. Let me have a look.
Yeah, someone asked if there's going to be recordings, and I just want to say yes, at least through this week. So you can catch all of these replays this week.
Indeed. It might also help you if your internet's bad. Someone put it in the chat to turn your camera off. It might help you to see us. So you can try that.
And the session will be an hour long. I'll answer that question as well. All classes this week will be 1 hour long. 1 hour to explore every single pose. Oh, it's going to be such a rich week.
Yeah, it does feel like quite a luxury to do that, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's on the hour. Great. Okay. Well, welcome everyone who is here. If you are in Zoom, if you're on the live stream, if you're on Facebook, YouTube, if you're on the replay, welcome to the Embodied Yoga Principles Masterclass series. This is the first session of 26 to come, exploring all 26 embodied yoga principles, postures. Again, we can't fit everyone into the Zoom room. If you are a student, if you have bought any of our courses, you're welcome to come into the Zoom room. But anyone outside of there, we can't see you. So if you're here, turn your cameras on. We love to be interactive. That provides the teacher, Karen, today, feedback. But of course, if you don't want to turn your camera on, that's fine. We will be able to see your comments wherever you are if you're on the live stream. So please bring important questions about EYP to the class. We'll probably get to them at the end if there's time. This session will be an hour long, and it will cover Giving Pose, brought to us by Karen von Menen. The EYP is for personal use. It's also it will be Karen's job to show you how EYP can be used in your personal life, but also in your work. If you're a coach, if you are a teacher, if you're new to yoga, actually type in the chat now what you are arriving here as. If you're using EYP for yourself, or if you're looking to use EYP in your therapy work, if you're wanting to use it in your yoga classes, type in the chat now, or just bring that to mind, your intention about what you're here to get from EYP. So the big thing, yoga teacher, one-on-one sessions, studying EYP, therapy, awesome. Yeah, EYP can be used for so much. You're going to see really how all the different ways it can be used for myself, to learn about it. EYP will explore these archetypal ways of being, and today we're going to be addressing our giving. So there is still time for others to register. So if you can share these classes with some friends of yours, this is the very first session, so we still have time to bring in lots of new people, lots of classes to go. And if you're already, Steve just put that in the chat, the link that you registered at, please share that with all your friends. It's going to be a really big week, like we were just saying before. It's sort of a luxury to spend a whole hour on each pose. And really, we haven't done anything like this before. So then now is your chance, share it with your friends, bring them in. But if you're already sold on EYP, we do have trainings that we will be addressing later this week. So bring those questions for your own trainings at the end. So now I would like to introduce our teacher for this session, Karen von Menen. Karen is an Embodied Yoga Principles teacher. She is an Embodiment Unlimited course facilitator. She is a yoga and meditation teacher with a master's in science and mindfulness studies. And she has been teaching compassion-based mindfulness full-time since 2008. I have personally learned EYP from Karen. I've been around her. She is a lovely presence, and I really enjoy hearing her meditations at our team meetings weekly. So Karen, I will hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I always sound so good when people read my blogs. Brilliant. I've also got, which might be worth mentioning, I've also got a background in performing arts and storytelling. And one of the things I love about EYP is that it can get us into these kind of archetypal embodiments, ways of being that maybe are a little unfamiliar to you, but that EYP allows you to try on, as it were, a bit like changing your identity a little bit temporarily. So this is the first masterclass of the week, and it's entitled Share Your Gifts, Sharing Your Gifts, for people who want to contribute to the world. And firstly, I think it's for you. So obviously some of you said that you are here to benefit yourself, and you might want to use it in your therapy work, yoga work, or coaching work. And it's really something to practice for yourself before you give it to others. And hopefully this week you get loads of ideas and experiences of both. EYP was really what started me off on my embodiment journey in 2014, when I first learned this principles-based system, which in a way is not really yoga. We've called it embodied yoga principles because it's quite similar to yoga, but you can use it in lots of different ways. It's non-athletic, so everyone can do it. And it's also not aimed to be a spiritual practice like traditional yoga, though it might well inform your spiritual practice if you have one. So it's very, very accessible. It's very practical, and it's really to support you in your life. It gives important life and maybe communication skills that you can bring to your personal life and your professional life. It has a lot of psychological depth. So even though it's simple, and someone put that in the chat, it seems so simple. How can it be so amazing if it's so simple? It is simple, and it can go quite deep quite quickly. So it has a potential for increasing your self-awareness, as well as quite deeply potentially changing how you are. It can also offer us a quick state change. So there's some calming postures, there's some postures that can fire you up and change your state in those ways. So yeah, let's start with a little meditation. This is often how I start my sessions, because embodiment, we say, is basically how you are and how you want to be. That's our simplest definition of embodiment. So if you don't know how you are, then you don't necessarily know how you want to be. So let's start with a mini kind of mindfulness practice. So you might want to look away from the screen or close your eyes so that you can connect to yourself. EYP is about connecting with ourselves and then with others. And mindfulness is quite a big part of it, mindfulness of how you are and how you want to be. So first, feeling your body. How is your body right now? What are you noticing? You might notice something physical, something emotional. You might notice some subtle things you weren't aware of before you paused and paid attention to yourself as a body. allow your body to move a little bit if you want to. Look around and then come back to the screen. And I'd like to hear in the chat how resourced you feel right now from a scale of 1 to 10. So if 1 is, I probably should really be in accident and emergency or something like that. And 10 is, I feel on top of the world. I could climb Everest. I could do anything right now. I'm so feeling so great. Oh, pretty good. Lots of high numbers. I'm asking because EYP has this potential to go quite deep, which can be surprising. So if you're below 5, please take care of yourself. You might just want to listen and not do the posture. We're just doing one posture. Let's see how it goes for you. And remember that you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. And if you feel like lots of stuff is coming up when you're in one of the poses or reflecting on it, you can always stop, you can walk around, you can have a little shake and focus more on listening rather than doing. The doing part is, the experiential part is one of the main reasons I think this simple practice works so well and goes so deeply, and why embodiment is so useful in coaching practice as well as various forms of teaching or facilitation, including yoga, because it can have an effect. If you have any one-to-one students or coaching clients, and I see it in myself, you know, we can make all these self-improvement lists and intentions and New Year's resolutions and all these kinds of things. Think about it lots, talk about it lots, and we're still somehow not able to change. Does anybody recognize that? You can put your hand up here in the Zoom room if you do, put something in the Facebook comments. Yay, I'm not the only one. What a relief. So the experience is what can be really helpful and also what can be sensitive. And there's going to be some masterclasses this week, like the one Vijayadasa is doing on death posture, for example, and our life's purpose, that are going to be probably a bit more emotive than this fairly joyful one, giving. However, you just never know what's going to come up. So I'd like to start by demonstrating giving pose, and you can join me if you want to as I explain the different parts, and then we'll explore it a bit together. So you don't have to do this standing, by the way, you can do it seated. I'm going to show you standing and then I'll show you seated afterwards. So in EYP, we often use this leg stance. I'll show you now. And if you're sitting, you can sit with your feet firmly on the ground on a chair. We start with the feet a bit wider than hip width apart. If you had a yoga mat, it would be about to the edges of the yoga mat. And then take a fairly normal step forwards, so not too long, in a way that helps you to feel very balanced. And then the back foot slightly turned out to give you a bit more of a stable base. And that's important in this posture. And then we bring a bit more weight into the front foot, about 60% of our weight. So from the side, looks like this. So there's a slight forward motion. And the leg stance, if you do practice yoga, you might think looks a bit different from what we might do in yoga with postures like warrior. The system EYP, devised by Mark Walsh, is quite influenced by martial arts. So that's partly where that comes from, a kind of strong base where you wouldn't be pushed over very easily. And then there's this forward movement, and there's a sense of open-heartedness in the pose, giving, generosity. We also call it generosity pose. And it's often helpful to start with your hands on your heart, to reflect for a moment. What do I want to give? What do I want to give? Maybe you're gifting this session today to yourself as a personal or professional development gift. So you might like to imagine giving this to yourself. You might already be thinking of people in your life, loved ones, clients that you want to give something to. And then we extend the arms forwards at about heart level, a bit wider than shoulder width apart, the fingers and the palms open, and the arms extended, not overextended, almost straight. It's probably the best way to describe it. And looking straight ahead, maybe imagining you're giving something to someone you care about. And you can breathe out, maybe sigh a little bit. And notice how that posture feels, how the basics of it feels. Does it feel sustainable? Sometimes when we're over-giving, we might be a bit off balance. The back foot might become very light and we start to lose our balance and it would become less sustainable. So that might be something you could ask yourself or a potential client. Do you tend to over-give? Another indication sometimes of over-giving might be when we come out of the pose, which I invite you to do now, that it feels like a bit of a relief. Oh my God, I've been doing this so much today or this year or in my career. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of giving. Later in the week, we'll have receiving pose, and we often pair those two up to explore that balance between giving and receiving. If it is a bit like, oh, that was quite a lot for me, do have a little shake out. And you, as I said earlier, you could revert to just listening, maybe making notes. If you want to join me on stepping forwards with your other foot, just to make it a bit easier on your hips, we can explore under-giving a little bit. So we can start off with about 60% of our weight on the front foot, the back leg extended. And we can go into the basic pose, giving, and then we can take it back a little bit. We could bend our elbows a bit more, bend the back knee. So from the side, you can probably see a bit better. It's like I'm not quite willing to go there. I'm leaning back a bit. I'm not convinced I want to give this. And we probably, all of us, find ourselves there sometimes. You know, however much we want to be in service to our clients and people we love, sometimes maybe because we're tired of giving, we've done over giving, we get into a place where we kind of can't do it anymore. So this contrast principle is very interesting and one we use a lot. We have a little play with undergiving. Does that feel familiar? Or maybe in an area of your life that feels familiar. It's very contextual, of course. Overgiving, and then finding that balance. Like, where is this embodiment sustainable, comfortable enough? If I said, let's stay in this pose for the rest of the hour, how would that be? And then there's often a bit of a moment of truth with a question like that. How would it be to be here for, you know, a long time? And the other moment of truth is to really notice again how you feel when you come out of the pose. Is it a relief? Or did you want to stay there? So that's often a very interesting moment. So we tend to ask a lot of questions in EYP, and there'll be questions like, where do you need more of this in your life? Or does it feel familiar in a way that's kind of resourcing? Like, oh yeah, it's familiar and I want more of it. Or is it familiar in a way that's exhausting? Like I mentioned when we were in the pose, oh, I do so much of this. I need to stop doing this for a while. If it's unfamiliar, it might be because we don't do it enough. So there can be a sort of longing for it. Oh, I've got this gift I want to give to the world, and I haven't been, and I feel a bit sad about that. You know, maybe I'm holding myself back in some way, or whatever the circumstances of my life are creating obstacles for me. So there could be a longing to give, and an unfamiliarity accompanied by longing. Or there could be an unfamiliarity that's uncomfortable, where the posture might bring something up that we've suppressed in ourselves. So it's become something where we're a little bit afraid to go, if that makes sense. And that might not be, what all of those might not be coming up for you with this pose, but they may well do later in the week with other poses. So yeah, feel free if you're here in the smaller Zoom room to put into the chat what you noticed. What did you notice in that posture, if you want to share? Overgive, undergiving felt contracting and uncomfortable. Comfortable, not too much, not too little. Giving can be tiring, yeah. Undergiving, I felt fearful. So we often do sort of quite simple, brief shares in our EYP trainings to notice how we are in a pose, where it might be useful in our life. It's more of a coaching tool than a therapy tool, so we might not go deeply into the why in this system, but there could certainly be lots of stuff that relates to deeper levels of your psychology. And yeah, wanting to give more in a certain circumstance and less in another life circumstance, absolutely. So you might, you know, for example, I'm just thinking of the example of being a parent of very young children, you know, then you're probably spending most of your time giving to them. And that might feel like quite exhausting and depleting at times, and you don't really have much left. That might be a context you're thinking of. And then you might be thinking, well, I'm undergiving in other areas of my life. For example, for me, I've been spending a lot of time working and online since the pandemic. And I feel like I've neglected some of my friends a little bit. I've been giving less to friends and more to work. So it can be balancing stuff out between lots of different contexts, and really useful, I think, for most people to explore work-life balance stuff with this particular posture. So these kind of deviations, we call them, overgiving, undergiving, they're often quite unconscious. And sometimes it might just be like someone put in the chat, oh, I got a bit of a painful back after a while. It might be uncomfortable to stand like that with your arms up for a long period of time because you've got a sore shoulder. So you might have your hands a bit low or something like that. But sometimes there's repeated what we call deviations. So for me, almost always when I first demonstrate the pose, almost always I go into overgiving. Automatically, my back heel comes off the floor. And it's still a habit, it's still a pattern in my body, even though I know this posture so well now. I've known it for 6-7 years. And I know this habit in myself, and I still go into it. So when you get to know the postures well and you observe your students or your clients, you can sometimes help them, especially with this contrast work of undergiving, overgiving, and asking some questions around, how do you overgive? Where would you like to give less or more? Where would you like to receive some stuff to support your giving? Lots of really useful insights can come up. So EYP can be very insightful. I'm just looking at the chat again for a second. If someone experiences pain in the pose, I think is that physical pain? Is it emotional pain? I can show you the seated version, so it could be a really good way of exploring it as well. Come back a bit so you can see my chair. You could have one foot a little bit forward on the floor, feet in a similar position, and you could soften it a bit. And you can also do it smaller. So we often talk about micro poses in EYP. So we can go into this embodiment by making the big shape. And then we can notice how that feels in our body. That sense of wanting to give, maybe imagining someone in front of us that we want to give something to. And then we can gradually make it smaller without losing that embodiment of generosity. So then I could simply sit like this, maybe with my palms up or one palm up, still a little bit of extension in my spine, so a lift in my rib cage, open eyes, open forward gaze. And I feel very similar. Physically, the outer shape is different, but my internal sense of how I am is the same. I'm still in giving pose. So you can try that if you haven't already. Maybe you tried it with me. Can you go into the full shape? And this is hugely useful because generally, we wouldn't necessarily go into this posture if we wanted to apply it directly in our life. It might look a bit strange or over the top. But if we make it smaller and retain that quality of open-hearted generosity, maybe a bit of a smile, I can hear in my voice that I'm smiling, then that generosity embodiment is still there. So essentially, EYP is much less about the physical, like you might if you do yoga for stretching your hamstrings. It's much less about getting those things exactly right. However, initially, like learning the basic form of the pose is quite useful, so we can look into the deviation element potentially. Excellent. So we can explore a couple of coaching questions if you want to for yourself to come back into the pose. Again, notice, if it's too much physically or emotionally to do that. And And you can do the seated micro version if you prefer. So coming back to sense of generosity in our embodiment. Changing it if you need to a smaller version, a micro version. And then we can spend a moment with this question. What am I not giving to myself? What am I not giving to myself? A bit of a self-care question, which often brings things up. So noticing that and coming out of the pose, maybe having a bit of a shake out. If something important came up, you might want to write it down, share it with someone later. So this is one way in which we can apply EYP to ourselves for our own self-care, self-awareness, a really important part of embodiment work, self-awareness. And then we can explore a we question. So going into relationship. So again, if it's helpful, you can touch your hands to your heart, and if you want to, you can bring a specific relationship into your mind, a specific person or people. It might be a client group, it might be your family as a whole, or one person. And again, we can go into the pose, into the embodiment of giving, and ask ourselves, what do I need to give more of in this relationship or in my relationships? What do I want to give more of, maybe? And again, coming out of the pose, noticing what that's like. And it's okay if you don't get an answer. Often people find answers come relatively quickly because of being in the embodiment. It kind of takes us out of thinking about it mode and a bit more into a deeper level of experience. So with coaching clients, you might get a bit more of a direct and possibly more heartfelt answer to some of these potential questions you could ask. And then, of course, we could do more. We could reflect on, how is my giving out of balance? Maybe, if I'm over giving, what could I give less of to protect myself? So it could be exploring themes around your purpose, your gift to the world, your talents. Are you giving them? You could do an inquiry into ethical marketing. We use it quite a lot in marketing training. What is your gift? What do you want to give? It's kind of selfish if you're really good at something that could really help other people, not to market it. And what is holding you back in those sort of contexts? And then there's lots of other poses we've got that could apply to that. Being in service, what are you in service to? Things like sacrifice and different ways of giving. We've got another variation of this I'll quickly show you, which is offering pose or humble giving, which can be a really interesting one. So it's a kneeling pose. Can you see me okay? I think so. And you would take your gaze down, as in sort of taking a bow, and then offer something up. So it's a little bit more along the lines of making a sacrifice, maybe unconditional giving, giving with a sense of being in service to others. So that's an interesting one to play with as well. A lot of the postures have these variations and micro poses, slightly different ways of doing them to bring out another quality of that main archetype, if you like. So it can be, it can bring up sometimes some sadness, as I said earlier, if you feel stifled in some way by giving your gifts. But generally a pose that can help us to address work-life balance and get more inspired about what we want to give and how we can benefit others and how we can practice being more generous in our life, perhaps, as well as being more generous with ourselves. Excellent. I'm just having another quick look at if there's any questions. Are there any questions, Sarah, that you saw that would be good for me to go into just now?
There was a good question earlier. Oh, there's a few more. Let's see.
Oh, is it important to make the pose alternating each side? If you're doing it a lot, then you might want to do that. In yoga, we can be a bit obsessed about doing exactly the same on the left and the right side so that the body develops in a balanced way. But if you're just doing it, as a one-off, it doesn't really matter.
Someone asked earlier the difference in the state of mind between giving and receiving. And I thought your question was really good. What am I not giving to myself? If you're giving to yourself, how is that different than receiving?
Yeah.
Or like if you could, how do you go between those things?
Yeah, because obviously whenever something's being given, it is much better if there's someone there to receive it. So anyone here in the Zoom room who is more of a giver, who tends to think, well, I give more than I receive, I'm not very good at asking for help, maybe it tends to be quite a lot of us because it's maybe part of a culture and dominant world religions to be generous and to give. But if there wasn't anyone to receive your gifts, then you'd be a bit stuck if you like to give. So I often think of it that way. I like to give certain things to my mom or my partner, and they like to do things for me or give things to me. So it's also actually made me better at receiving stuff and asking for help and receiving help, because it's changed my perspective a bit on that dynamic between giving and receiving. So there is maybe, in that sense, when there's something being given, there's generally something being received. Connection between body and mind and thought. Yeah, so we do use these reflections and questions in the practice and some thinking, reflecting on that to tease out the main insights. And people like to use things like journaling, we use discussion. We tend to focus more on doing the pose and having simple, quick debriefs so that we don't go into, all the reasons why too much, because of the sort of practical emphasis of the system and embodying it. Too much thinking about it and too much talking tends to muddy the waters. So in our workshops, we tend to have quick debriefs, quite a lot of silence whilst people are in the poses to feel the body and to notice, what's coming up from your body as a source of wisdom or realization. And then they're often quite clear, clear insights. So there isn't as much need, it seems, to think about it a lot or to talk about it a lot. Is that your experience as well, Sarah? Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, definitely. I also wanted to get to this. If you notice the over giving, what kind of, do you just immediately go back into receiving, or how do you stay? If someone asks if you noticed an over giving, how do you make an adjustment for that? Once you notice it, and like you were saying, you can't,
yeah,
you don't really know how to change it in that moment. So how do you adjust to work past it?
Yeah, I would probably start by getting back to a balanced posture and exploring what would be sustainable, because it's often not possible to just stop giving, unless someone is having a burnout. Then it might be more about that, like go into receiving mode. Often it's interesting to explore the balance and what they might need, and to keep the back foot firmly on the ground in relation to the posture. So and then the questions might be about, how do you make it more sustainable for yourself? What do you need to do that? And then coming up with some practical things that the client can go and do, some accountability, etc., so that the life change can be made. And we often give clients or students, you can do this in yoga as well, a posture for homework, if they're not giving their gifts to the world, for example, because they're shy to put themselves out there or whatever. There could be some homework in doing this posture every morning and stating what your gifts are and what you're giving to the world, and then setting some goals around actually bringing it to your life. And part of the magic seems to be that, certainly that's been my experience, when I've done a posture like that, say for 3 or 4 weeks, every morning I've practiced a pose, then I do find it just creeps into my life. A personal example was doing no posture, which is coming up later in the week, and realized I wasn't very good at saying no. Also part of my overgiving pattern. I think if someone asks me for something, then I go into yes very quickly. So doing no pose in front of the mirror for a few weeks, I then noticed I actually started to say no in my life as well. So it kind of builds that embodiment, and before you know it, it's changed you. So beware. I use it quite a lot in my classes and groups as well. I run groups for women. I obviously use it in my yoga classes. So I have a class on Monday mornings. I often introduce 1 or 2 EYP poses. Like, what might your intention for the week be? And as my students are getting to know more of the postures, I can invite them to choose a posture of their own, or I might say, what's going on for you guys? We have a bit of a check-in, and there might be a sense, so everyone needs to do a calm down. So then I choose a sort of calming pose. And with giving pose as well, it can be a really nice thing to reflect on in yoga classes as well. What do you want to give this week to other people? How can you be generous to yourself? There are lots of themes in there that I can use in group work too. Also, when we work in groups, it's quite powerful if everyone is doing that same posture in a room. And sometimes we all face each other in a circle. Imagine giving something to each other. Sometimes we might do some pair work where someone stands near you, has got your back. If there's no distancing, obviously you could actually put a hand on someone's back. You can come up with all sorts of group and pair formations in classes and workshops to have really deep explorations of these things. And that can bring up even more. In yoga classes, I tend to keep it kind of fairly light. I might just put this one in as a sort of variation on warrior pose and kind of related to being open-hearted rather than that more sort of fiery warrior mode. And sometimes in a workshop, I'll go much deeper into it. And also creating these little sequences like giving and receiving together to help my yoga students with their work-life balance. Any more questions?
I was going to ask if you think that like the poses, if someone here found this really difficult, is it advised to work on the difficult pose, or do you think stick with what's comfortable, or is like, oh, this is really hard for me, obviously this is the pose I should be practicing?
Yeah, often if it's hard for you, it's assuming it's not physical, like you can adapt it for physical stuff. If it's emotionally hard, I would go back to the question at the beginning, how resourced are you? So if you are feeling burnt out, then it's maybe another posture later in the week that's better for you, like self-care pose will be coming up. If you're well resourced and it's bringing up some challenging stuff, then it might be really interesting to go a bit deeper into it and dive in and find out what that's all about. So I think it really depends on how you are. Hopefully by the end of the week, you'll have a few poses up your sleeve. And if you thought, oh, actually, I do want to practice these for myself before I take them to clients or into a yoga class, we recommend the EYP sandwich. So you practice the one that you find more triggering or kind of more difficult, like my no pose was quite difficult for me initially. In the middle, that's the filling, and your 2 slices of bread are the ones that resource you, that make you feel good. It might be a bit of a fiery one, like we've got something called enthusiasm pose. That might be for some people that's really triggering actually, but that might be one that kind of lifts your spirits again, or self-care, or a sort of calming one. So you wrap it up in a resourcing sandwich. If that makes sense. Do you say? If not,
This is a really good question. Would it help to add dialogue while using these poses, like a mantra or something? And then there's another question about doing it in a mirror and what that would do. So maybe both of those tools might be useful.
Yeah, I think the mirror is like a step towards applying it in life. So if there's a posture like giving, actually all the postures have a facial expression, and in some postures that facial expression is quite crucial. Like if you look really grumpy whilst giving, or really friendly and smiley whilst saying no, then some of that impact is lost, certainly in relationship. So it can be useful to look in the mirror. It can also help you to get over some self-consciousness. You can check out the micro pose, like, do I still look like I mean it in the micro pose? And then if you were comfortable enough, you could ask a friend or a colleague, if you're a teacher or a coach, to observe you in it and give you some feedback, like, do I look like I mean it, kind of stuff. And so it's a kind of calibration from just doing it whilst nobody is watching you to you watching you, and then someone else, someone trusted, and then maybe trying it out in a situation where it's important. So EYP offers a simulator for something that you might want to try in your life or professional context. So you learn it in a safe environment, and then you can calibrate up, make it a little more challenging step by step. Yeah, so the kneeling pose, bowing down, it's got a bit more of that humility in it, sacrifice, surrendering maybe to being in service. It's used a lot in rituals, things like kneeling, asking someone to marry you, or religious rituals. There's often kneeling to maybe explore devotion to how you give, elements of devotion. Could be very interesting for that. Giving attention, yes, it certainly can be about giving attention. I'll just show you the pose again from the side view as well, which was a request from someone. Attention, time, the gift of our presence and our listening is maybe one of the greatest gifts that we can give to people. So giving, side view, again, going a bit far, so I'm bringing myself slightly back to counter my habit to overgive. So my back leg is still firmly planted. I'm not leaning forwards, not leaning backwards. So the forward movement is mainly just from this knee bending. This is slightly lifting. My gaze is straight ahead and open. Excellent. So I think might be good to have a moment to just reflect on the pose and what you've learned. So you can sit back for a moment and again, maybe look away from the screen. Notice how you are in your body now. And seeing if there's anything specifically that you want to take away from this session. Something that it's offered you, given you, that you want to take away, an insight, a practice. You can share it in the chat if it helps you to share it. So often we use that with groups, a little bit of shared inquiry to embed the learning and also to embed any intentions we might have around the practice. If you think this is really good stuff, you can help others and us by sharing the links to all these free master classes. Explore giving with no one receiving. Practicing sandwich poses, yeah. There is in a simple pose to explore, to feel, and to grow our resource and embodiment of human experiences.
Mm. Wonderful. Karen has given us, she has given us a lovely overview of giving today. And if there's any final questions, you can go ahead and put them in. We only have a few minutes, but you can really see how this process and this method can be used in your personal life. And I'm really excited to see, everyone said that they were bringing in different things and that they were going to use EYP in their own work. And I'm really excited to see how you use EYP in your work, whatever that may be. So stick around for the rest of the sessions this week. Steve, we're going to show you just a little quick video first on EYP and the way it can be applied.
What the EYP course for coaches has to offer you is a way to shift things from getting stuck in the head and getting into the body. These very simple forms can be done in normal clothing, in any setting, anywhere, and you can then begin to look at the patterns that might be keeping your clients stuck. As a coach, I use this mostly with my clients with intimacy and relationship and communication, and as soon as I get them to move from the cerebral part of the conversation and getting them down and into their body.
See yourself as you see other people, because I have a very critical eye at the moment.
So when you sign up, there's plenty of support available to you. We have a private Facebook group that you are welcome to join. We have monthly Q&A calls, so you get a lot of ideas of how other people are using the same things.
Beautiful. So you can really, if you've had insight just in this one hour, you can really see how it would be impactful over a prolonged period of time through practice, and of course through practice with your clients and your students as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I first learned it, I actually went on the training because I felt a bit sort of stuck in a rut with my yoga teaching, a little bit bored, and it's given me so many ideas. 6 years later, I still haven't run out of ideas of how to apply it. And initially, I was a bit nervous about putting some of the poses in. Some of the postures are really the same, like we do warrior pose in EYP. We have that in yoga anyway, so that's quite an easy one to slip in and just slip in a couple of these questions into a general class. But when I started to do things like giving pose or no pose, a lot of my students really liked it, and I got lots of unsolicited positive feedback about it, which, you know, didn't seem to happen more when I use EYP than general stretchy yoga poses, etc. So yeah, the main thing is to introduce it a bit gently into a class, so you don't suddenly bombard people, and if you're going deeper with it, give people some clue that it, like I did, that it can go quite deep. Ask their permission before doing that, or making it clear in how you advertise yourself as a teacher or a coach, so people aren't suddenly thrown into something that they didn't sign up for. And I think exploring it for yourself is a crucial part of that, because there'll be one or two of the poses that you find really uncomfortable, at least, maybe more, but where you go, oh yeah, if I was suddenly asked to do this in a yoga class, I might not be too happy, might be a bit much. And others are much easier to sort of integrate lightly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, from learning from you years ago, and now I still, in this session, there's still insight that can come. So like, that's the beauty of this work, that it's just an infinite source. of insight. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you have another look at the menu, the 26 pose menu, you know, if there is one where you think, oh God, that sounds really awful, I don't want to do that one, then, you know, maybe that's the one you need. And remember self-care and resourcing as well. And all the teachers this week are trained in how to look after you, but obviously you have to
Lots of great
let
posts.
them.
The next one is actually a bonus session. So today, this next session that's coming up in a few hours with Julie Martin on language and embodiment is a bonus session. It's not one of the 26 poses. We added that one on. And then also with Simon later this evening. So 2 a.m. UK time, but for us Americans, that'll be late this evening. So stick around if you're able, and please invite your friends. Like, this is the first session, so there's still plenty of time to invite more people to this week, because we're only getting started. And like, we're gonna say it again, an hour into each pose is such a gift and a luxury. And someone just asked replays. Yes, they'll be available replays this week. And there's a link for the training yourself. If you know about the training or know someone who's gone through the training, if you haven't been through the training yet, when you enroll right now, you do get access to these recordings. So if these recordings you get to keep forever if you do decide to become an EYP teacher yourself, or there's packages for EYP for personal use too. You'll get the training, the videos as well. So we are on time. Thank you everyone so much for joining us at the first session of the EYP Masterclass series. Thank you, Karen, for being here. Thank you, Steve, for hosting. Thank you everyone for participating. It was so great to see all your feedback and insight from this lovely class. It is such an honor.
Yeah. Thank you for gifting us with your presence.
Thank you. And how about we finish with a mass unmute?
Yeah.
So goodbye, thank you, or traditionally fuck off in your first language.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't fuck off. Don't do that. Yes. Bye. Thank you. Thank you so much.